For spending a morning with me as I mill up the last logs that I have in stock. This is the first time in over 4 years that I haven't had logs sitting on deck ready to mill. I'm doing a couple things different here. For one, I'm using a ladder to make my top cut on the mill there. Normally what I've done is put cross rails on either end of the log and then a board to flatten the first cut there. And that's worked great. I've done thousands and thousands of board feet of lumber that way. I have had really very few issues with that process, but I had this old ladder lying around and I'm in my backyard. So I thought to myself, we're going to give this a shot. It worked great. I had no issues with it. What I would do going forward for the next time is I would add 2 cross pieces to the ends of the log that my ladder could rest on to avoid racking. But you know, I think it's probably a skill thing for me. I've been able to develop the skill using just a 2x6 really to keep my mill flat, and so you can kind of see that there's the opportunity for the ladder to flex. But I calibrated that pretty early on and I had no issues using the ladder on either of my flattening cuts. Now this is kind of a reflective moment for me. Maybe I'll put it that way.
All right, so I have this really nice pine here. Got that blue staining because it's been sitting for a while, and it's been sitting with the bark off, which really helps. But all that blue is going to be gorgeous. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to cut some thicker pieces, and then I'm going to cut some 1 and probably a 1/4 inch pieces. So that's going to be 5/4. We'll see. Got a nice level top cut using the 661 CM. It's cutting like a dream. Got steel ripping chain on it. Been a while since I milled, so I'm excited to get back into it.
I've had logs available whenever I wanted them. Really, over the last 4.5 years, people were taking down trees unbelievably, at an unbelievable rate. We had some storms, and you always have storms, but aside from that, there were a lot of renovations. People were spending a lot of money on their properties, removing a tree, trimming a tree, and the tree workers, the arborists and the tree guys were very busy. They were very busy. So what that meant is they had the cutters go out, drop the trees, and buck up the logs, and then sometimes the logs would sit for, it could be a couple months before they could finally be picked up by the log truck. That's actually how I got started in this business.
These are fairly pretty. And we are just ever so shy of 15. And I cut this one to, that's a little over 5/4. Not quite 6/4. So this will be nice. I'll be able to plane that down. I do have a little bit. What I might do is, what I like to do if I get nice vertical grain here and here, look at all that pine resin coming off. That would all start on fire if I put a lighter to it. I like to just cut that pith right out. And I think I'm going to end up doing that just because of these 2 knots. I'll probably cut right here and right here, and then just have really nice vertical grain stock for rails. And then this isn't mold, that's all pine pitch. This is 3.5, so these are going to make really nice legs. I'll get at least 2 legs out of this. I'll cut the pith out and just have leg and leg. So these will be really nice.
I would see these piles of amazing logs sitting on the side of the road. And if you don't know anything about the Atlanta metro area, I'll tell you, we have some of the best urban forests in the country. It is absolutely incredible.
Okay, so here's one cut. That piece is going to be really nice. Although that blue staining doesn't go all the way through the log. It really just goes through maybe about the first, I don't know, 3 inches. There's a second one. These are coming out really, really nice. I'm very happy with how flat these are, how nice and bug-free they are, ant-free really. We have powder post beetles and ants that are my biggest enemy. But look at that, from end to end, I don't see a single beetle or ant hole. And that's because even though these have been sitting on the ground for weeks, you know, I took the bark off. And that's how important taking the bark off is. Just absolutely critical. These are such nice boards. Such nice boards. I'm extremely happy with them. These are going to make really good rail and tabletop stock. This piece, that's about the worst one of the bunch. But even a piece like that, if it's got such excellent vertical grain there, is going to be something nice. So I'm going to let the saw cool down a bit, refill it with fluids, and get back at it. All right, so how many cuts have I done? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've done maybe 7 cuts. And I have, I don't know, I'd probably say a 1/4 inch of gas down in there. I am running a really rich oil mixture. I'm running 30 to 1, which I think might be a little bit too much. I'm getting a little bit more oil residue than I would like. And so I might, after running these 2.5 gallons, I might switch to maybe 35 or even 40 to 1. But I mean, the way I see it is if you're running a good quality oil like I am, you're not going to have carbon buildup. Woo. And if you run it hot, like I am, wide open throttle, you're not going to get the carbon buildup that people talk about when they talk about running too much oil. I mean, if you throw too much oil and then you run it at half throttle, you're just asking for carbon buildup. But this saw, my problem is running this cool enough. I don't have any problems running it hot and full throttle. This thing has lived its life 99% of the time full throttle. So I've had no carbon issues so far, fingers crossed. The chain is still cutting really, really nicely. Taking that bark off really helps extend its cutting life too. I'm gonna get a measurement here. This is 56 inches long, and at the top it's 10 inches wide. At its widest, it's 15 1/4. So that's just under 5 feet. This would make a reasonably sized dining room table. You know, for a small family in a small house like I live in, this would be okay. It'd be a good piece of utilitarian quality furniture, which is what I'm all about. So let's mill it.
In terms of the diversity of species, in terms of the age, the quality of the lumber, it really is incredible. The urban forest in Atlanta is very, very real. And the reality of the situation is trees age, and when they age, they fall over or they get sick. So we have any species of tree that you can ask for in Atlanta. Sometimes they're culled, sometimes they fall over, and they just sit there. And the arborists could cut. They could cut at a rate far faster than they could haul away the.
Not exactly sure what happened there, but that did not go well at all. My rails were gliding. I wonder what happened there. Okay, so here's my biggest problem with Granberg. I don't see a reason why there aren't any positive stops on their mills. That is just insanity to me. It is just ridiculous, because here you are, you know, even when you use a stop block, you'll think that you're level, and then you peel your log off, and it goes and it just looks terrible. And and it just looks awful. So I'm way off there, probably about 1/8 of an inch. I don't know how that happened, but we got to fix it now. Okay, so here I am. Now I've got a jacked up board. Let me see if I can show you how jacked up this thing is. Okay, you see that? That's not the camera. That's a it's a twist. And you know, like I was saying, I don't understand why there isn't some means of adding positive stops to this mill. I'm thinking about ways to add it on myself. You know, you could even put depth blocks on the mill. You could put you could cut recesses into the rails. You could do all kinds of different things, but I don't. To me, there's no excuse not to have it at this point. You know, we've had these chainsaw mills around since what, the 60s, the 70s. I mean, as soon as chainsaws came out, it wasn't too much longer that somebody was chainsaw milling with it. But I mean, the thing is, every screw up that I've ever had chainsaw milling has been because of the stupid depth adjustment on these Alaskan mills. To me, there's just no excuse for it. It's ridiculous. And I could engineer a solution all on my own and come up with something, but to me, that's a whole lot less ideal than just being able to purchase a product that I know can be engineered and use that. So anyways, things were going so well, and then I don't know how that happened, but we got off. So let's see if we can correct it with this cut, because if I can't, what I need to do is put the ladder back on it, reset the mill to flattening depth, take the ladder off, unscrew everything, reset my mill back to the thickness that I want, and it's a gigantic pain to do that. So I'm really hoping I can avoid it.
Logs. And so that's how I got started, is I'd go up to the homeowner, say, hey, I noticed you got some logs there. Do you mind if I grab a few? Sure, go ahead. They have no issue with that. And I've never had a problem with arborists either. I've never had an arborist say I can't have logs. And you might think, well, isn't lumber expensive? Wasn't it more expensive 4 years ago?
The top's going to be jacked up, but hopefully the bottom is okay. Yeah, the next cut's going to be a lot better. We are still just a little bit off here. That's about maybe an eighth, maybe an eighth. I mean, probably. Yeah, okay, well, we've got it about fixed. And, I will say, my elbow hurts from, the way to fix it is to just try to bend the mill to offset the twist. And to do that, you have to kind of get the saw cutting canted at an angle, and it doesn't want to do that, and it's hard on the saw, and it's hard on your body, and it doesn't work every time. So I'm really happy that it worked this time, but that was more wear and tear on the saw and the bar and the chain and the mill than all these other cuts combined. So, I mean, it's my screw up, but the problem is relying on the mill either blocks is the best possible scenario. The depth gauge, throw that out. Throw that out, it's garbage. I don't use it anymore. It doesn't work. Especially when you are twisting. This is the thing that's ridiculous. You're twisting one side of the mill, trying to keep it level. You're applying rotational force, levered, trying to keep something square to the mill, and it just doesn't work. So throw that mill away. But even with depth blocks, it's difficult. And milling is tough on its own. So you know, I'm gonna have to make some kind of a mark on these. These are gonna be my the boards that I gotta do extra surfacing work to. But you know, let's see how this next cut goes.
Yes, absolutely. But these are residential trees. Sawmills won't accept residential trees in my area. There's too much metal, and I will tell you, there is a lot of metal in residential trees. Sometimes you get lucky, but you know, like for these, I'm not worried about metal in these particular trees because these sections of pine probably came from 10, 15 feet up, 20 feet up. So there's not going to be any metal here. But for instance, if you get, you look at where that tree was placed in somebody's yard, if you get an oak, something like that, you know, people put spikes in to hang laundry lines and to hang ornaments and yard art and all kinds of stuff. There's screws, bolts, lag bolts, and that stuff can just be absolutely brutal to hit, ruin your day. So sawmills, they don't mess with it. They don't touch it. And so for arborists, for them, it's a waste product. That's the first thing that I learned about when I started doing this, is there is no market for residential trees. Some arborists try to sell their logs. I've never met one or seen one that can do that regularly and get good value, which is kind of frustrating because for me, I'm willing to take that risk to pick up a nice saw log. You know, I'll if I ruin a chain or two, you know, that's kind of the cost of doing business, is how I see it. And I'm not running I mean, if I were running maybe a bandsaw mill or an older circular sawmill, I mean, that could be quite a bit different. I mean, at that level, you know, especially with a circle sawmill, that can be dangerous if you hit metal in a log. So I understand why they don't want to mess with it. But for me, running a chainsaw mill, it's not dangerous to hit metal. I've hit metal countless times. It's just annoying and it's expensive. So for me, the value really does work out, that I can take that risk. You know, and there are ways to mitigate it with metal detectors, and you know, you look for blue staining and all kinds of stuff. But regardless, back to the point, I've never had an arborist say no. I mean, and you got to show up and kind of look like somebody that can haul a log or two away. Don't show up in a mid-size SUV or a Ford Pinto. I mean, show up with a truck, with a trailer, look like you're ready to work, look like you're somebody that can handle the weight, that can handle the stress, and I think that plays a big part of it too. You know, I show up in a work truck. I don't use a trailer much anymore, but you know, when I did use a trailer, it was like, hey, I'm ready to go, I'm ready now. And they just, you know, take the Bobcat, load up the truck, take the mini skid, load up the truck. It's great. It works out awesome. But that doesn't happen anymore, because when the trees are cut, they're hauled away that day. The logs are hauled away that day. I mean, before, you'd have an arborist, they'd show up if they were taking down a tree. They'd bring a chipper and a truck to haul away the chips. And they'd chip all of the branches and limbs up, and the logs would sit there for weeks and weeks. And I had plenty of opportunity to pick up whatever logs that I could handle. And I was often at capacity and over capacity. But now they bring you know, a chip truck to take the brush away, and then they have another truck to haul away the logs. And so they all go to the landfill, and there's really no opportunity to harvest them. I think that's a sign of the economy. People are not spending money on optional things anymore. I don't believe that people have taken down all the trees that could be taken down. I mean, we have millions of trees in Atlanta, and you know, honestly, we probably have too many trees if you think about it in the Atlanta metropolitan area. If people are taking down one tree, they have 6 more in their yard, and they're all mature, and they were all planted 50 years ago, too close together. And so you do end up with a lot of, I think, room to cull trees that need to be culled. I think if we did cull some, overall, the ecosystem would be healthier. So instead of having 6 dying trees, maybe you have 3 very healthy, full canopied trees. So anyways, that's just the way it is. But yeah, this morning of milling, you know, I'm just thinking about a lot of stuff, because I will tell you, on the other side of the spectrum, nobody wants to deal with volume like I am able to accommodate. They're not interested in somebody that can take 1 log, 2 logs, or even 1 truckload of logs. That the volume is a hassle for them. I have not found any arborist that will sell logs. I have not found any sawmills that will sell logs. I haven't found any timber buyers that will sell logs. And I'm near a city of 7 million people. You'd think if it was going to exist anywhere, the market for logs would exist here, but it just doesn't. So once I'm out of logs that I can salvage, I don't have any more materials to work from. There's no more logs for me. And I've gone as far as a couple hours outside of the Atlanta metro area, and even there, at least the people aren't as rude, and they'll kind of talk to you and consider it, but it's always a no. I think the way forward for me, if I was looking to expand, would be to get land and then call up an arborist and say, you can dump your logs here. That's what I would do. And that would save them a trip to the landfill, because the landfill can be an hour and a half drive. And that's a lot of diesel, and you're paying these guys to sit in the truck in the AC instead of out there cutting or loading wood. That would be the way to move forward, but it's difficult to spend the money on a lease and then go out and try to find somebody to make it worth your while. And so I'm kind of stuck at the moment. I don't really have a way forward. But the economy, I think, is the cause of everything right now. People keep telling me, it drives me nuts when people tell me things like the economy's great, the economy's stronger than ever, things like that. It's just a bunch of nonsense. Maybe statistically, when you look at the metrics that are used at the national level by people that have an interest in skewing them to say a certain thing, maybe then you can torture the numbers so that they look good. But if you look at average people and you look at what they're spending money on and what they're not spending money on, they're not doing anything optional. And when the economy's good, people do that stuff. During the COVID lockdowns, people were at home and they had money to burn. They weren't commuting. They were still getting a paycheck. There was all that government printed money flowing through the economy, and so people had the funds to do things like take down a tree, to spend $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 taking down a tree for their enjoyment around the house. But those days are gone, and now we are suffering the incidental effects of that. I am an incidental effect. So it was great while it lasted. I really enjoyed it. But I guess adapting is the name of the game now. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, but we'll see. We will see. But these pine logs are great. These were bucked to be removed. And so that's why they're kind of they're odd lengths. They're not 8 foot, they're not 16 foot. They're just whatever the guy that was cutting them to length cut them to. And so from there, I have to be creative, and I have to look at the material and decide what I want to build from the material, instead of looking at a project and then purchasing the lumber. And I enjoy that. I really do enjoy it. I've always been the type of person that enjoys working with what I have to build something, instead of wanting to build something and then looking around to source the materials. I think that's just a more harmonious way to do it with nature. I don't want to mass produce stuff anyways. And so this way of working really fits my temperament, I'll put it that way. These are really nice pine boards. If you look at old colonial furniture, you're going to see boards just like this. That's why the breadboard end was so popular in the colonial era and eras after that, because they would gang saw a log and end up with full length boards like this. And maybe they'd cut the pith out. I try to cut the pith out if I can. And you see that one in the middle there has really big knots there, so I'll have to cut that out. But I'm going to leave these long, let them dry. I'm going to put a lot of weight on them so they stay flat. And then if I want to cut them down later to dimensional lumber, 1x6, 1x4, whatever the case may be, I can do that, but I don't have to.